yeah.
Okay, so we're outside now at the flying field here with my good friend Alex, who's just got his Neo 2 and he's completely enraptured with it. I have to say, it's a nice little thing. So you saw it on the bench and this is it in the aircraft, and in a minute you'll see some footage with the head tracker working and just flying around. I haven't got another airplane to fly against at the moment. I didn't bring my ground-based rifle for shooting airplanes down, which shoots just infrared, that's all. But I will bring that at some stage. So just to go through it again, you have, here's the gun, which fires the infrared. Here's the heads-up display. Here's the camera, which is on the gimbal, backwards and forwards. Nice little VTX antenna. And then there's the sensor. There's a sensor here, and there's another sensor on the bottom. So that's going to give a full 360-degree bubble around the aircraft, so that as it's flying, it should receive hits. I'm not quite sure how the propeller is going to play into this, but as I said at my desk, right, I think the data rate is going to be high enough that you'll be able to register hits still through the propeller, because it's transmitting data really, really fast. So it's a beautiful day here, as you can see. And do you like the goggles? I thought I'd put the goggles on and the jacket today, just for full effect, right? Because we are talking about dogfighting. Let's not forget that. So the software is actually written now. I've done a bunch of updates to the mapping, and I'll do a little bit after this at my desk. There are two views. There's now a God view, which basically sits above the aircraft, so you can see it as it's flying and you can see the aircraft symbol move. It's just a triangle, and it's supposed to represent effectively a flying wing. And there's also the cockpit view, so it's as if you were sitting in the cockpit and flying the aircraft around on Google Earth. But anyway, we'll look at both of those when we get back in the warm. But for now, this is it. And as I say, in a minute, you'll have some footage of it flying, and I'm ironically going to try and shoot myself, which you can do in FPV. It's quite the thing. All right, so not going to launch it just yet because I haven't turned the battery on, but we'll be in the air very, very soon. So see you up in the air.
Okay, so launch the plane. You see the head tracking's already working. When I get it up in the air, I have to reset the head tracking, but here's the head-up display you can see, and you will see there that you've got the ammo and the lives. So when you're dogfighting, I do this with programming in iNav, so basically I just create global variables, and so you can see how you're doing in the air. The head tracking's working as you look. I'm looking just slightly off there to the right. If you watch the gun sight, you'll notice that it stays on the same piece of landscape regardless of where your head's pointed. So as I move my head to the right, you'll see that it still keeps pointing, and you can see it's got quite a good movement with that head tracker. So the gun sight basically is harmonized to wherever the infrared is moving, so you can basically just use that to find your target. This is just giving you some idea as to how the head tracking is working. You'll notice the effect of the gimbal. So the gimbal is cutting out a lot of the bump. It's a very windy day, and you can see that by the movement of the aircraft. You know, I've got a bit of wobble in there. I probably need to do some more tuning on it. This is in angle mode right now. So here's me coming to do a simulated low pass to some guys standing out in the middle of the field, which would be us. And as you can see, over the treetops, move slightly to the left. Go on, you've missed. There we go. We might have got a quick shot in. It's quite fully encapsulating as you're flying. You know, here we are. You can see the gun firing there, down to 292 seconds. I've set it to 292. Not that you would want to do that in a proper fight. You'd probably want to limit it to a reasonable amount, like you know, sort of 14 to 30 seconds, really. You know, because you need to be careful about how you use your ammunition. This is just really just making sure that the data is being processed when you press the fire button, and when I get another aeroplane up, we'll check the lives. But on my bench tests, it just works fine. So here's a little bit of a landing, or crash as we call them, and this is what it looks like as it's doing its little low pass and trying to shoot at everybody. It's quite a rapid little thing. I do love the Dolphin. It's a great piece of kit. I had a bit of a problem getting it in the air. I had to change the horns from the stock one from the factory.
Okay then. So what did I build? Let me see. I showed you it working outside. What does it consist of? It consists of one of these, which is a Pipeco. Let me just switch to my desktop view and zoom in a little bit for you. There you go. So Pipeco is, for those of you that know it, will love it. And those of you who don't know it, you're about to love it. It's a processor, it has Wi-Fi on it. It will take Python, and it's just an incredibly powerful machine. It has all sorts of I/O pins on, really no shortage of I/O. Has 2 UARTs, which is very good for us, and I'll get to that in a minute. Just any type of I/O, you can measure analog signals with it. It's a great device, and really quite cheap as well. So they've been around for years, just bulletproof. What I've built is I've built this board that goes with it, and you can't really see there, so let me just zoom in a little bit more. There's a bunch of connections on here. There's a connection for a PWM input. This comes from the flight controller, and this tells it when you've pressed the trigger. Okay, there's a sensor, and the sensor is basically looks like this, and it has a bunch of IR receivers on. Each IR receiver is capable of receiving 90 degrees. So with 4 of them, 90 plus 90 plus 90 is 360, right? You've got full coverage there around. They're tilted at an angle so that you get the angle here and then go straight up as well. So, you've got all the way out and all the way across. So, sorry, now I'm a bit difficult trying to keep this in frame. So with 2 of these, you've got one on the top of the aircraft, one on the bottom. You can cover a full 360 bubble pretty much all around your aircraft. So if someone does shoot at you, it's going to register. On the back, you've got 5 volts ground and a signal wire, and there are 2 sets of pins because these things can run in series. So you just basically would connect a lead up from here to here, and then from here to this board right here. So that's what the sensors are. So we've done the sensors, right? Then we've got an LED. This is this here. It's a little NeoPixel. You can set all sorts of colors on it. I'll get into that in a little bit. Then you've got the very most important thing, which is the gun. In this particular demo, I'm going to be using a little laser unit, which is here. But you can't use lasers when you're flying around in the sky because people get upset that it might shine in somebody else's eyes, and it's quite understandable because that can be quite dangerous. So we're going to use a little infrared LED. This is quite powerful. I wouldn't really worry about the power requirements. The Pipeco, it can't handle very much current on its output pins, but we've taken care of that because we've provided 2 little MOSFETs here and here. One of the MOSFETs is for the gun to fire. So basically you send 3.3 volts to this and it switches 5 volts onto the gun. This one here is for what's called the match. The match is a little charge, which looks like this. Basically it's, how can I put it? It's a little detonator is what it is. You just connect this up. On my demonstrator here, I've got these chocolate blocks because it's just easy to replace them, but I've put an LED on there as well. So, when you actually die, this goes live and this kicks this off. This is plugged into a smoke charge, and the smoke charge generates smoke because that's what smoke charges do. Back to this board here. What other pins do we have here? We've got, where do we get to now? I'm trying to work my way across. So we did the gun, we did the match, and then there's a web one here. So on this Pipeco, as I mentioned, there's a little wireless unit here. You know you've got the right Pi Pico if you see this silver thing, because this is the cover for the Wi-Fi unit, right? There's a little web server that runs on here, and it will allow you to configure the game. So you can say how many lives you get, how much ammo you get, and you can agree amongst your friends what that is going to be. And that's going to be basically the round for the flight. Also, it's going to log. So as soon as you arm, up until you disarm, it's logging. It's reading telemetry from the flight controller. It's reading your location. It's reading attitude information. So it's going to read your pitch, bank, and roll, and yaw. So the nice thing about that is that there's an application that sits on the back end, as it's a web page basically, that this is going to serve up. So you don't have to install anything on your computer or anything. It's all run from here. And what it will basically do is it will download those logs. It will turn them into a KML file. For those that know, for those that don't know, that's Google Earth. So it will produce a file that you can load up onto Google Earth. I'll show you a demonstration of that in a little bit as well. So all the way across to here, that's the web. You've got connections at the top here. You've got 2 serial UARTs. One is for receiving information and one is for sending information. So one's for receiving information, one is for sending information. The information that we receive is the telemetry from the flight controller, because the flight controller has GPS. GPS is providing GPS to the flight controller. The flight controller is passing that telemetry on to here. The telemetry that we're sending is, and INAV, please, I beg you, can you provide some custom telemetry items that we can use for things? Because what I've had to do to be able to make this work is I've had to think about, well, which telemetry don't we generally use? And I've gone for the rangefinder. And what I basically do is I send a number from here to, I basically emulate in software a rangefinder. So I'm sending values as if it's rangefinder values to here, and using program logic within the flight controller, I can get 2 types of information out of that. I can get how many lives you've got left, and I can get how much ammunition you have left. What will happen is that gets passed into the flight controller, and using some programming logic, that then becomes global variables, and the global variables are then displayed on your OSD. So you can see how much ammo, whilst you're flying in your goggles, how much ammo you've got and how many lives you have left. So it just is a little bit more immersive. That was quite a bit of a pain in the butt to do that. Had I have had the option of generating a custom telemetry, you don't need many, 5, right? Then as well as programming logic, in programming, if I could set send this global variable as this telemetry item, that would be really, really useful, because people could do some very cool things by putting computers like this paired with this and do some very cool things, right? This has got so much power. You can't do any real programming on here because this thing's, it's got a job to do, right? It's got to fly the aeroplane. So you can put all sorts of code on here and have this thing execute that code using this receive and transmit protocol between the 2 units. Okay, so this switch here is what's called the web switch, right? So when you power up the aircraft, if this switch is set, then it will come up and it will start the web server, and you can just connect to it with your computer or your mobile phone, and you can set how many lives you're going to have for this next sortie. You can set how much ammunition you're going to have and all that good stuff. And also you can download the flight afterwards and view it in Google Earth and put your goggles on and be Douglas Bader. Okay, so you take these 2 units here and you put them together. It's quite simple the way that they go. On here I've put, it's very hard to read, but I've put the names of the pins along here, and they match up with the names of the pins on the bottom here. So as long as VSys, right, which is here, and VBus and VSys are in the right place. So if I look on here, I see VBus and VSys. So that board has to go that way around, and just a couple of headers, one in here and one in here. And does anyone remember Blue Peter? Here's one I made earlier, right? So this is one I made earlier. So you just put the header pins in, you solder the 2 boards together, and that's the unit. So That's what you can actually see here. That's what this unit is right here. So working through the connections, you know, I've been through them all. PWM goes to the back of the flight controller. This is effectively the trigger. This tells it when you've actually fired the gun. You've got the sensor. So this wire here is connected to the bottom of this sensor right here. You've now got the LED, which is connected to here. You've got the gun, which is connected straight to the back of the laser. Remember, this is switched by that MOSFET, so you haven't got any current issues. You've got this, which is the match connector, right? So this basically goes connected into here, and we're going to plug in this little charge thing here, this little igniter thing here into here, which I'll do in a second. Okay, so that's the hardware. So on this side here, this is everything that you would normally have in your aircraft. The only things that you have that's new is this board here, which when I weighed it was 12 grams. You've got this thing here, which is, I don't know, weighs absolutely nothing, right? And this little thing here, right? Which basically will be one of these, just an LED, another LED, right? So that's really the hardware. And, you know, I did this just because it was a challenge, really. I just wanted to do it as a challenge. And I want it to be open source because I'm kind of interested to see what people do with this. And I'm also very interested to see what other things people do by connecting up a microcontroller to these little wonderful flight controllers that we have. The possibilities, I think, are great for putting a daughter computer onto the flight controller to make it run well. So, okay, so we'll dive a little bit into the code in a minute, and we'll see how it's working. So that's the hardware. Oh, one thing I did forget was, if I switch to my desktop and zoom in here, I mentioned the web thing. I've just put a little switch on here. So when you talk, when you hear me talking about switching it into game mode and into web mode, that's me just flicking this switch here. So you'll see me do that when I start talking about the software in a little bit. Just before we go into the software and how it works from a hardware perspective, I've got these other units that I've built, right? So this is what I use for testing, just to make sure that the other one gets set off. Each of the units, it's a configuration switch. You just have to go and edit one file and change one value. It can either operate in game mode or in target mode or in web mode. I mentioned that earlier. There are the 3 different modes that it can run in. And this one here, I've just set up as a target monitor. What that allows you to do is you can put the aircraft over there somewhere and you can figure out where the gun is aiming. Because it's using infrared, and I didn't mention this earlier, there are errant infrared signals around just in everyday life, right? They just appear around. This is a little bit smart because each of these units, it creates an ID for the unit based upon the serial number that's on the PyPico. What that allows it to do is, for example, if you're at a field and suddenly you can see 5 Wi-Fi hotspots all saying dogfight XXX, right? You'll know which one to connect to because you'll get to know the number of your aircraft, because it will the web the Wi-Fi connection that you make is dogfight, and then the ID for your aircraft. Not only that, but when your laser shoots, it shoots your ID. So the person that you shoot knows who shot them, right? That's very useful, but that's not really the main reason why I did it. When this thing detects an infrared signal, it says, okay, great, that's an infrared signal. It says, okay, is that infrared signal a signal that I'm expecting to see? And I can show you a quick demo of that right now. So if I turn this on, and oh, by the way, this power supply here, right? This is a Anchor power supply. This has a lovely feature on. If you've got some low current devices, if you press this button twice, it goes into trickle charge mode. Most of these batteries that you get, when you plug something like the PyPico into it, it draws so little current that it basically just turns straight off. So you can see now that it's running, right? So if I get I've got here a remote control. So if I point this remote control at it, it'll be an infrared signal. It's not working for some reason. Let me go and get my other remote control. There's no batteries in it. That's what it is. Don't you just hate it when you run out of batteries? Wait 1 second. So it's my TV remote. It never runs out of batteries. So if I have this here and I point this at it and I send it an infrared signal, it turns blue. It turns green if it's a valid one. So if it's something that it recognizes as another dogfight aircraft, it will turn green. If it turns red, it means it's just infrared and there's no information in it. It's just an infrared signal. If it turns blue, it means, yeah, that's a proper signal and there's data on it, but it's not the data I'm interested in. So the sensor's actually doing quite a bit of filtering to make sure that a hit is a real hit. Okay, so that's one thing that you can do with this. And you can see it's gone red now because it was kind of off beam and it just got some infrared. So what my monitor over here, I don't know, it's something to do with the light frequencies that come off of my monitor. It just turns red, right, whenever I point it at the monitor. So it's exactly that type of thing that the differentiation is there for. It discriminates the infrared signal that's coming in. It says, okay, does this have data on it? If it doesn't have data on it, it's just an infrared signal, I'll ignore it. If it's got data on it, if it's not data that I can recognize, I'm going to ignore it. So a hit really will be a hit. It's important to know. So as a final bit of wahoo-ness, let me just switch it onto a desktop view. So I'm going to make sure that the program is running. Let me just go and start it up. I could disconnect it and run it and restart it and it would just work. So I'm going to start it in, let me just check here. This is in web mode. So I'll switch it back into game mode. I'll start it up in game mode. And this little package over here, this one, is the same thing, but I've just put a PWM unit on so I can actually simulate me pressing the trigger. Okay. So if I just plug this in for a second, it will automatically boot up. It will think it's in a game. So I just get the PWM signal here. If I aim this at the target, let me just zoom out a little bit so you can see what's going on here. So I'm going to aim this at the target and I'm going to fire, which means turning the PWM up. I've got 3 lives. So I'm going to shoot it quickly 3 times. And then, as long as I've made the electrical connection, something should happen. 1. Whoa, there you go. Okay. Always makes me jump when it does that. So that there is what is in your aircraft. So don't put it next to any foam. And if this was a real thing, then we'd put that into one of those little smoke charges they use for rocketry. And you'd get smoke coming out of your aeroplane, which would be very embarrassing because it means that you just died. So that was using an infrared laser. You can see here when I turn the PWM up, right? Oh, it's run out of bullets. I left it running, it's run out of bullets. You do have limited bullets, right? It's really, really important to know that you can't just spray and pray. And this is where the game's going to get really, really interesting because you can reduce the number of lives and you can reduce the amount of ammunition. So you better be pretty damn sure because you could be fighting a great fight, but you run out of ammunition. And, you know, it's not good because then you just become a target and you can't fight back. Apart from ramming the other aircraft, but that's just antisocial behavior and it shouldn't be allowed. So let me just go to my desktop for a second. Not my desktop, my monitor for a second. So this represents the Pi Pico here. Let me just stop that, it's running. Stop that. So this is the code here. The main bit of code is this thing called main, which every time you start the unit, it's going to just run that code and that's going to run the program. So whichever mode it's set for, whether it's in target mode or in web mode or whatever, it will just automatically start up in that mode. So if you flick this switch to web mode, when you power up the aircraft, it's going to go into web mode. What happens when you do that, let me just run it in web mode for a second. So it comes up, and you'll see here, if I switch to the desktop view, you'll see that it's now pulsing purple, which means it's in web mode, right? So I flick the switch and I put it into web mode, powered it on, and it's come up in web mode. So if I go back to my monitor a second, if I go to here and I can go to connect to Wi-Fi, it says a dogfight 004. What that means is a dogfight minus is the standard name. The 004, what it basically does is it reads the serial number on the PyPico, and it comes up with a hash that basically represents that. So it can be any number. It's very hardware dependent. This is just helpful. So if you're at the field and you get two signals, you know which one to connect to. You can change the password on this if you don't trust your friends. So if I connect to that one now, okay. So it's connecting away. If I click on this link here or this one here, it really doesn't matter. You can connect, if you just remember that IP address, that's always the IP address it's going to be on. Or you could just use this. It's just a number, a URL. So if I run this website comes up, right? So this is actually being generated by the PyPico, which is why this is so nice. I can either go to here and say, well, I really don't want to do that. I want to just start the game now. So I could click on this and it would just go straight in and play the game. Or I could go to match setup and I could set up the number of lives, the amount of ammunition that I want. Or what I can do is I can do this thing, the KML builder, right? So if I click on this, I have some log data already on this unit, which I generated some test logs. So a spiral and a triangle and a square and just funny shapes, right? So it takes samples, and this is basically, I want to do every single sample. I could make it every other sample if I set it to 2. There's a tail length, which basically is a smoke trail. So you can specify how many points you want the smoke trail to run. You can set how far behind. You can do a cockpit view or a chase view. For cockpit view, you're in the cockpit. And for chase view, you can say how many meters behind and how many meters above or below. So 10 meters is positive is above, negative is below. And what speed do I want to play it back? I'll play it back at 1, right? And you can do the direction of travel or telemetry yaw. So the difference between these two is yaw is whatever the flight controller reported as what your yaw was, right? Direction of travel is, well, what's the angle between this point and the next point? So it will kind of position you ready for that. Both work reasonably well. Then there's 3 recordings. So I've got 3 flights that have been recorded here, which is, I'm very proud of this because there's not a lot of space on a PyPico. So I've managed to keep the code to a level where, you can record flights on here. It's a full cyclic thing. You don't have to worry about it running out of space, because if it fills up, then it's just getting rid of old flight information. So it's a constantly cycling buffer of flight information. So if I click on this test the stream, so I can sit here and it downloads basically the first 10 entries. So you can see here, it's from session 1. This is the time. It's saying 1970 because, frankly, when I did, this is test data and it hasn't got a GPS connection. But what you would see on your flights is you'd see the proper date and time in there, because it would get that from the GPS and it could set the real-time clock inside the computer to do that. Your latitude and longitude, you all know where I live now. Your altitude, what your roll, pitch, and yaw are, okay? And then what it's basically going to do, if I really want to, is I can say download KML file. So what it does, it takes that, and you can see this thing comes up here. Say I want to keep it. And if you just click on this, what happens is it starts up Google Earth. And we're not interested in advertising. Okay, so there are 3 flights on here, right? So if I just go through this with you very quickly, there's a gun sight, you can put gun sight on. You've got flight 0, flight 1, and flight 2, right? So you've got an aircraft, a wing, a stem. You don't have to worry about those. What you're interested in is what's down here, right? So I can say play flight 1, flight 0. So if I click on this, what happens is, now this is moving by the yaw and pitch information that it captured in the file.
So you get a whole bunch of nice little bits of graphic here, right? So, you know, you can scroll around and you can see. I want to be in a situation where I can load up flights from 2 aircraft so that they time sync, and so you can see the 2 aircraft flying against each other. I haven't done that yet because, quite frankly, it's taken a lot of effort to get to this point, which is why I'm going to be calling for some help from developers to be able to work on this if it's something that interests you. So if I go back to play now, and it will go back and follow. So it's setting that distance and the altitude above or below that we set when we pulled the data in. And then there's a cockpit view, so I can do the same flight from the cockpit view, in which case it turns the gun sight on. So when we do get 2 flights in here and we're playing them back together, then you can see how close you were to hitting the other plane, because the other plane will appear. That's my intention anyway, right? I think this is kind of cool. I really like this. And even if you don't use it for dogfighting, just using it, and I'm going to make a version of this, a version of the code that is just going to go as a data logger so that you can do this, right? So you can just go and fly your aircraft, and it will log the flight, and you can come out and you can play it back directly into Google Earth. It's that simple. The restriction of it is because you're using the Wi-Fi connection to create the KML file, you can't then go to the internet, and as you know, Google Earth needs access to the internet because it needs to know how to draw all these lovely houses, right? So you can download the KML file onto your phone. You've then got to disconnect from the aircraft, connect to the internet, and then you can play the KML file on your phone. It works just as well there. So that's the software side of it, and hopefully now you've got some idea as to what it is. Call to arms time, guys, right? I'm going to make this open source. I'm going to provide circuit diagrams. JCP&L will just make the boards for you. I am going to offer the boards. So if you don't want to do the whole electronics thing and get the order from China, then I can sell the boards and you can make your own kit. So you get, it would basically be the board, the sensor board, the LED board, and then you just basically fit it to your aircraft. The software is open source, and you just download the software. I'll write a user guide for you to tell you how to do that. If you want to get involved in this with me, then please leave a message in the comment, and also distribute this to those other flyers that you know in other groups that probably aren't going to see this. I'm not a huge YouTube channel, but I'm doing this work because I love the hobby, and I think the more we do to help each other and expand what is possible within this hobby, the better. And so I think we should be supporting each other in doing these things. And iNav developers, please, I beg you, can we have a small set, literally south of 5, custom telemetry items that we can connect up a daughter computer and have it do stuff and still get the telemetry information into the flight controller and sent to the transmitter? Because the one thing I haven't been able to do, I've been able to get the ammo and lives, and I'll do a little bit of video on that outside with the aircraft later. I haven't been able to get the telemetry to the transmitter. If somebody knows a really cool trick, I've got it in global variables in the flight controller. If someone can tell me how I can get a global variable to my transmitter as telemetry, then I would love to know. I think it's going to involve me writing a Lewis script, which is, something else I haven't ever done before. I hope you're excited about this, and I'm very excited to see what people do by connecting these up to these. This, I think, this flight controller and a small processor sitting on the side, I'm fascinated to see what people start doing with these things. Okay. So let's just go back outside, and I'll talk you through the aircraft and show you what all the bits are as well. So all the, as well as the files for the circuit board and the software and everything else, I've got some STL files. So I fly this in a Dolphin. If you have a Dolphin, I've got a bunch of STL files. I've built a little tray to put the gimbal into for the head tracking. There's an STL file for to hold the gun sight and to hold the gun. So I printed that together so they're perfectly harmonized. So wherever the gun sight is pointing, the gun will be pointing in the same place, right? It's not going to work if you've got a puller, because you'll be firing through the propeller and you won't get the guaranteed data rates. It's an important point to mention. When you're positioning the gun, don't have it flying through the propeller, because the differentiation that we do on the signal to make sure that it's a real shot and not just a random infrared signal, that's great and everything. But if you're flying through a propeller, you're basically going to be chopping bytes out of the information that it's sending. You know, I don't know how much of a problem that is, to be honest with you. I will do some testing on it to see if it actually, because the propeller, compared to the data rate that this is sending at, the propeller is actually moving quite slowly. So I may be worrying about something that's not actually a problem, but I just wouldn't do it. Okay, there we go. I will talk to you outside and show you around the plane.
Subscribe!